Thank you guys so much. I'll tell you what a great pastor you guys have. Pastor Juan celebrating 25 years, him and Kimberly off on this time together. He takes the whole family with him. I mean, that's a pretty good heart there. But that's just sort of tip of the iceberg. I love Pastor Juan. We've known each other for a lot of years. You may know a little bit of the backstory in that he came as a brand new kid to become a pastor at a church where I worked, and we kind of mentored, got a chance to baptize him, even got a chance to officiate that wedding 25 years ago. And so I watched him grow, and here what I see, and I share this every chance I get, there's something real special going on here at Unleashed. Pastor Juan in this place at this time with all of you in this community, I can just see how God put this together. And what I see in him, I'm not surprised, is he never loses his enthusiasm. He's always had that boyish enthusiasm since he was a boy. But now he's not a boy anymore, but he still has it, and he carries that passion, and he just keeps digging deeper and deeper. When I've talked to him, he never just cruises or floats along. He's always digging deeper, and that's why you see through announcements things like Growth Track, things like Financial Peace, all this stuff offered to us. Unleashed doesn't make anything. Most places you go, they prompt you to go further because they probably make something off the bottom line. All Pastor Juan wants is for all of us to be more spiritually healthy and grow, have better families, have better marriages, have better peace within us. And he's on it all the time. He's passionate about it. He never leaves alone. When we go to breakfast, he's always telling us about the new thing, from Saddleback Church or the church up in Phoenix or stuff that study courses he's doing on his own. He makes the rest of us, some of us pastors, I'm a retired pastor, look kind of lazy. But I'm so happy and cheer him on and cheer you guys on because there's something cool happening here. Most churches, when they first start off, they have a honeymoon period and people come out of curiosity and they grow pretty quickly. Well, Unleashed is way past the honeymoon period, but you guys, your growth rate and your baptism rate is pretty amazing. I mean, usually that stuff tapers off as years go by, but not here. And so God's doing something pretty amazing through Pastor Juan and through you. I just want to say that when one pastor asks another pastor to step up and speak to the family with a microphone, that is a big honor to do that. And I know it doesn't come lightly. The fact that I'm able to come here and teach right now is very honoring and humbling. And we have some good stuff to talk about. And I'm so happy that I get a chance to do this together with you. Pastor Juan started last week in a teaching series, very wise, getting started off, the idea of being healthy. Like this is January, a lot of us are thinking about being healthy. And he shared how even physically, he's going through a time where he is really working on having better physical health. But more importantly, he really desires for Unleashed, the family, Unleashed the individuals here, to know how to become more spiritually healthy right off the bat in this brand new year. And so I'll just let you know there are 5 different principles that Pastor Juan has put together to help us to grow and to be healthy spiritually. I'm honored that I get to share the first one. If you were here last week, you saw he kind of opened up the topic. And I encourage you to remain for the next 4, because here's what I really believe. I've seen all the points coming up, that once we get a grasp of this handbook, once we get a hold of this, if we really will put into practice the things that are going to come out in the next 5 weeks, we have the tools that we need to really get spiritually healthy. We still got to do the work. We can go to the gym and see all the weights there, but you still got to go pick them up in order to get healthy or whatever it is. There's the treadmill. Look at it. There it is going around. I feel healthy already. You got to get on it to get healthy. And so, but we will be given the tools, the equipment to become equipped to be more healthy in the new and coming year. Today we're going to talk about worship, which is kind of interesting because a lot of us wouldn't put that in the category of here's what we learn to do to be more spiritually healthy. Worship kind of feels like one of those intangible, emotional things that we all sort of experience a little differently, and it's personal, and one person really shouldn't tell another person how they should worship. It's like, that's kind of weird. But the truth is, there's stuff about worship that I believe, and Pastor Juan sort of assigning me to dig deeper and study this, I have been missing, we potentially have been missing, and it's going to be awesome when we open this up. That's what I'm hoping today. We're going to evaluate worship today. Now, I was a pastor for almost 30 years, and that whole time, just because it fell into place, I was generally the guy who picked up the guitar and led worship services for 30 years, 2 or 3 services every week. You can imagine, do the math. I've done a lot of leading in musical worship in churches. But I got to tell you, digging into this was an eye-opener for me. After all these years, I'm thankful that Pastor Juan put me on this assignment because it's been prompting. I've been walking around thinking different. I've been seeing my family different. I've been in places thinking differently because I now have a different view of worship. It's not always comfortable. Sometimes it's pretty dang convicting. So I'll just warn you, fasten your seatbelts a little bit as we get into this. You may discover something that's amazing that we haven't seen before, even if we've been a pastor for almost 30 years. But some of it is going to be challenging and bring a little work to us and maybe even a little convicting, but the payoff is awesome once we get a hold of this first principle on becoming spiritually healthy. Let's say at Christmas time, somebody just gave you a Maserati. I mean, could happen, right? Walk out in your driveway, there's the big bow. Merry Christmas. And so we're very happy to get this high performance. These cars go for $300,000+. They're designed, they're engineered, they're amazing. And then we see that person just like last week. Here we are in January. They go, hey, how's the car working out for you? And you say, man, I love it. I drive it Safeway, I get my groceries. It's awesome. He's saying, please tell me you take it out, up to Mount Lemmon on the switchbacks and you get to really see how that car goes. Please tell me you go out to Saguaro National Park and in that scenery and you're just out there. Maybe you just buzz over to California on I-10. Say, no, it's a grocery getter, but I love it. That would be ridiculous. A Maserati, I mean, you could do that on a moped. You don't need a Maserati. And so my suggestion to us, and I want us to keep this image, is that God has given us this amazing gift in worship. It's like having a Maserati in the garage. And a lot of us, I'm convinced, just use it to go Safeway once a week. I mean, it's this amazing, powerful, wonderful gift that we've been given, and we mostly, a lot of times, leave it parked in the garage. You can kind of see where we're going with this. And we're going to open up that garage and stick the keys in and put the pedal to the metal and maybe enjoy something we've never enjoyed before. What I love about Pastor Juan giving me this assignment is the title, which he's called Love Through Worship. You're going to see love tied into love, and worship cannot be separated. And so we're going to see that weaving all through. The first thing that we need to do, if you went to the doctor and he had you come in and he said, okay, let's take a look here, he would start asking questions. I want to see how much you weigh. I'm going to see what your blood pressure is, see what your heart sounds like, your lungs. I'm asking questions because you got to ask the right questions before you can improve on something. And the same is true of our worship. We need to begin asking questions about our worship. And that's kind of new already. I don't think we generally do that. We look at worship and we ask things like, what is the purpose of worship? We're pretty sure we already know that. But it's a good question to ask. If somebody asked us that, let's say somebody who's never been in a church before and they've seen examples of it on YouTube, and they say, hey, what's with this? Why do you guys do that? That would be a good question to be asked, and we should have a really good answer for that. And it shouldn't be because it makes me feel good and we need something to get a hold of. So we ask those kind of questions. Some of the other questions that we ask, good questions we should ask are, am I doing this right? I mean, we're not even supposed to ask that question, right? I'm not supposed to come up to you and say, hey, I don't think you're worshiping right. That just feels like something we're not even supposed to ask. And then finally, among other questions, is my worship healthy? Well, what does that mean, healthy worship? So we begin by asking questions. What's the purpose? Am I doing it right? Is it healthy? And that's what we want to begin to do, is answer some of those things today. We want to have the full experience of worship, because when we get a hold of it, it's going to open up perhaps a daily walk of meaning, purpose, fulfillment, something we've been missing. Like, once I learned what worship was really all about, I was filled up inside. I was missing this before, and God wants us to have the absolute full experience of worship. Pastor Juan wants us to have the full experience of worship, because he wants us to grow and be healthy and be a healthy family, be a healthy individual. I know that each week there are people that come here maybe for the first time at Unleashed. That's awesome. And so as you come in, we desire for you to get the full experience of experiencing God and worship and whatever is going on here. By the way, if this is your first time, you've never heard Pastor Juan teach, please come back. I'm happy to fill in for him, but man, he's just got a way. He's a very gifted teacher, and I'd hate for you to miss out on that. So please come back. He's here about 50 times a year teaching. You just happen to get here when the old guy was here. So I encourage you to come on back. We're going to talk about three things today, three things that if we get a hold of these, we can walk out of here and we kind of have our checklist from the doctor to see if we're healthy. And we can look at these things and we may agree, okay, I'm good 1 out of 3. I'm good 2 out of 3. I need to work on that third one. But we really will get a hold of something we really can take with us and go, if I can get these 3 things in place and they are strong and thriving, I'll be spiritually healthy in the area of worship. I want to give you those 3 things. Before we do, I want to give a little bit of a caution. It is absolutely true that we shouldn't criticize another person's worship. And what I'm talking about right now is what we do in here, what Pastor Tony and the team have done, kind of open things up. That type of worship, you can go places where they don't raise hands. And if you do, somebody may go, hey, we don't do that here. That's criticizing somebody's worship. Or maybe the other way. You might be, I'm more this way. I'm more of a in the pockets guy. I like to sing. And I cheated. I stood in the back and I kind of watched us do the worship time this morning. There's a lot of this and it's awesome. But I've had pastors say, I can't believe somebody would worship with their hands in their pockets. You have to do this. And we shouldn't criticize somebody else's worship. By the way, the band that you have here at Unleashed, I'll tell you, it's such a joy to me to come. And especially that third song where Aaliyah kicked it off and you guys were singing and I could hear you. And you guys got some harmonies in there. It's like Wilson Phillips, Mama's and all the leaves are brown. There's something going on there. And man, I would take that out on tour. It was me, but just an idea for Pastor Tony. But anyway, you guys have, and it is wonderful, the voices in the room and that kind of worship is really awesome. But we should never look around and say, well, you should be more this way, you should be more that way, and you're too demonstrative. Whatever church families you may be a part of, you may see all kinds of things. Very conservative approach, people running around the aisles, cartwheels if you can pull them off, little Blues Brothers going on there. But we should never go, don't do it like that. The main thing is it sincere? That's my only sort of directive on when you worship. Is this you worshiping here in this place? And that should be our guide. Jesus showed up on the beach one time. This is after he came back from the dead. And he was walking on the beach one morning and the apostles were out in a boat a little ways trying to fish. And Jesus started talking to them. And John was the first one to recognize, and he said, that's the Lord on the beach. Well, as soon as he said that, Peter threw on his outer garment and jumped in the water and swam up to see Jesus. He couldn't wait. That was Peter. That was his personality. That was genuinely who he was. The rest of the disciples came to shore like normal people. But there's nothing wrong with how Peter did it. He's just being himself. He jumped out of the boat and he swam to shore. There's nothing wrong with how John and the other guys did it. They were just as happy to see Jesus, but they brought the boat in with the fish. That's how they did it. You may see all different kinds of ways that people demonstrate their worship here. And I hope it's sincere, and I hope we're just being ourselves. But this isn't a teaching about looking around going, you're not worshiping right, I'm going to tell you how to worship right. This is not that teaching. I want to make sure that you know that. So I'm going to give you these three things. It's going to be really easy to remember. You're going to be able to walk out and remember these three, especially these three words, and go checklist. How am I doing in my worship? And one of the first ones is family worship. Now, family worship is what we got to experience here when we came into the room to sing, and the lights are set in a great way, and the vocals sound great. And I love how Pastor Tony and the team kind of bring the music down in different parts so we can hear each other sing. That is indeed family worship. It is indeed something that stirs our heart and causes us sometimes to close our eyes and raise our hands. It is genuinely that. That's really, really good family worship. But I want to expand on that idea a little bit. As it says, as we look in Matthew, one of the things that Jesus said, 1 Thessalonians 5, that when we come together, this is Paul writing to, obviously, the Thessalonian church. He says, therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. That there should be an element in everything we do here that encourages somebody else. And here's what I'll suggest to you. If family worship becomes too shut everybody else out, I'm just going to forget you're in the room. Yes, I'm having my moment with my Jesus. That's what I'm doing right now. We're missing some of the directive of what we are to do here. And let's look at it this way. It is legit. It's a really nice experience when we come in and the band has us going and the lights are low, and it's a beautiful emotional, spiritual experience. But here's my suggestion to us. Worship starts, at least family worship here, starts when we pull in the parking lot. That from the time we get out of our car and walk in, we're looking for somebody to encourage. It might just be a smile and a howdy and, chit-chat. Swing the door open for somebody. Maybe there can be so many different things that we can do. Or, very directly, you may be familiar with somebody that's going through something. Trial. We share our prayer needs and our lives with each other. We're a family. And you get a chance to say something very simple and hopefully powerful. I've been thinking about you. I've been praying for you. How you doing? That's worship. The music hasn't started yet. We haven't really started here yet, but we're already worshiping family worship from the time we get out of the car and we walk in. If we really start looking at that as we come into our church families, we're going to see all kinds of opportunities to begin worshiping together as a family, even before we come in. For the hour and 15 minutes or so that we are here, we worship together as a family. I would even go as far as to suggest that if you're in here and the music has started and you see 3 rows up, somebody that you've been praying for, and you didn't get a chance to say hi to them out in the breezeway, that you might, while the music's going on and keep singing, come in, over up and just give them a side hug while you're both singing. They'll know why you're doing that. You're like, I got you. I can't imagine that Pastor Tony is going to go, wait, stop the music. Somebody got out of their row. He would never do that. I think it would warm a pastor's heart, a music team's heart, to be up here singing and see you guys, if it's genuine and sincere, moving about, worshiping together. It's kind of silly, but that's one of the things that since I have dug into worship, I've become more sensitive to in here. That's why I cheated this service and stood in the back, because I wanted to see you guys. First service, I stood in the front, and I just did like kind of a 3/4 turn while I was singing, so out of my periphery, I don't want to forget I'm in a room with my family right now. This is family worship. We kind of take it personal. Well, okay, we're here, the music started, the lights are low, I'm going to shut everybody out, and I'm just going to channel. God loves our praise. He loves our worship. He loves the things that we may say in the song lyrics to Him, and we mean it from our heart. But what He really loves also is that we encourage one another. We build one another up. Even when the music's going on, even before the music's going on, that's family worship. A text in the middle of the week, an email in the middle of the week. I'm checking up on you. How are you doing? How can I help? What do you need? That's family worship. So I want us to take a look at our clipboard and say, okay, family worship, if that's what it is, have I expanded out to that idea? Or is it just kind of me and the first 20 minutes of church, and when a good song comes on the radio at the stoplight, people look at me weird, but I'm worshiping in my car because I love that song? Or have we expanded it out to, no, worship is taking care of each other, loving each other, lifting each other up. There's a great family here. I know you guys do a lot of that already. I just want to encourage you to expand your idea of worship to that. That's family worship. Let's look at the next one. No, let's not. Before we move on, I want to do something. And we have a good crowd in here. One of the things I love about family worship is hearing your voices, our voices in the room. When I was a music pastor, we had a lot of years where we just kept everything amplified, and I realized service after service after service, I wasn't out there and I was missing something. And we'd start doing these breakouts like Pastor Tony does, where we'd kind of cut the music and pull the mics away from the singers and just listen to the room. There's something so uplifting about that. In a real brief way, and some of us are singers in here, some of us are not. And if you like to sing, I hope you'll sing. But I would love to have just a short little experience of those voices in the room. I've chosen a song that most of us know. And I hope you'll sing out and bless somebody else in this room with your voice if you like to sing. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear. Any moment. In church where I just got to hear the voices in the room, sometimes it's that. We lift each other up, we build each other up. It's more than just us having our moment, our private personal moment with God in the room. It's wonderful that it is that too. The family worship is something we do all together to build each other up. The second one that we see is real easy to remember. It's simply called neighbor worship. This is where we begin to expand the idea. I mean, I think we all understand that we worship at church. A lot of us have kind of put that in the music time. I'm trying to break us out of that. No, it's out in the cafeteria. It's in the hallway. We're worshiping when we're encouraging other people. This is the idea of neighbor worship, and to kind of demonstrate this, we're going to Jesus again He's on that beach, and Peter had already swum up to him, and they're on the beach, and he's talking to Peter. They're eating a little fish and little bread. And Jesus and Peter walk down the beach a little bit, and they have this conversation. Here's what Jesus said. It said, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And there's a little debate about what more than these means. Some people think it's more than these apostles, more than these fish. Are you going to be a fisherman? It doesn't matter what he meant by that, those three words. Yes, Lord, he said. Peter said, you know that I love you. So Jesus' directive from that point, if you love me, feed my lambs. What Jesus was trying to instruct Peter and put those two things together is that if you really love me, then you'll take care of my children. You'll take care of my lambs. And I think often, sometimes when we sing words to God during praise or whatever it may be, without really thinking about it, we may think, boy, he really likes this. I'm really lifting his spirits by singing these words to him or praising him or worshiping him. And God appreciates our surrender, our reverence, our humble place we are when we sing those words to him. But he doesn't need us to feed him. He doesn't need us to build him up. He doesn't need that. What he likes, what he loves is when we build up somebody else, when we feed somebody else. And I'm not talking about, in this case, in here, we've already covered that. This is the idea of outside the family, in the neighborhood. Who is our neighbor? Everybody who's around us. From the time we get up in the morning and whoever shows up at the breakfast table, those are your neighbors. Maybe your family, but it's your roommate, but that's your neighbor. We go out the door and we're on our way and we go through Dutch Brothers or Starbucks or whatever, and that the person that we see or the line that we're in, those are our neighbors. We get to work, get on the construction site, go in the office, sit out at our desk, go in the break room. Whoever we see there, those are our neighbors. Jesus says, do you love me? And we'd say, yeah, I worship you. He says, okay. Then help people out. Feed people. I had a good buddy, Pastor Brent. We pastored together for so many years. And he told me a story one time, just one of the greatest illustrations I've seen of this. In his neighborhood, this is his legitimate, for real, literal neighbor, was putting a sprinkler system in his backyard. And you know what it's like to put a sprinkler system in your backyard in Arizona. And so Brent ended up going over there that afternoon, and Brent's he's a little bit older than I am, and this was only a couple years ago. Brings his pickaxe, he's swinging a pickaxe in this guy's backyard, helping him put his sprinkler system in. And the guy finally said, why are you? It stood out to him so much. He said, why are you doing this? And I'm not sure the answer, if Brent gave a real spiritual answer, just said, I want to help you out, and knowing that maybe this will lead to a conversation in the future where they can talk about spiritual things. But he probably said something like, I'm just trying to help out my neighbor. Here's a cool thing that Jesus said in Sermon on the Mount. It just had started, like Matthew chapter 5, and he was talking, Jesus, a lot of you probably are familiar that we are called to be light in the world. Martin Luther King said, you can't fight darkness with darkness. The only way you can fight darkness is with light. When light comes into darkness, dramatic, powerful things happen. Here's what Jesus said about salt and light, that you don't take a light and cover it up, it doesn't do any good. He says, in the same way, let your light shine before others. And here's how he describes that light. That they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. We're talking about good deeds. It's not unlike good deeds you may exercise here to open a door for somebody, empathize with somebody, support somebody, except we do it out there. That we find people in our workplace and little things we can do just to help them out in our neighborhoods, little things we can do. Doesn't have to be big things. We do open the door for somebody at Circle K. We let them go first in line. We let them come into traffic. Whatever it may be. It could be bigger things. Maybe somebody at work is going through a life crisis. It's interesting what happens sometimes, and I don't think people find it offensive. If they're going through a life crisis and you say, I want to pray for you, anything specifically, just let them know, I'm praying for you. Oh my gosh. Even if they're not sure what they believe, or they're pretty sure they don't believe, when you say that to them, it lifts them up. However it may be, we find ways to help people around us. I told you that since I've been going through this teaching, it'll turn your radar on. That means that when you go back to work, some of you have the day off tomorrow, but when you go back to work this week, I hope all of a sudden we're going, these are my neighbors, and there's big and little things I can do. George left his original on the copier again. He does it all the time. But this time I'm going to bring it back to him and say, hey, I think you're missing this. Or clean the coffee pot in the break room. Wow, that's a big one, Or something like that. Clean the microwave in the break room. Whoa, powerful. But just things like that. We just have that radar where we go out our door and say, who can I help? And when we think like that, I promise you'll see possibly hundreds, I'm not kidding, hundreds of times a day where you go, I could help here. I could do something big. I could do something more significant. When my radar is really on to worship my neighbor, worship that way by neighbor worship, I'm going to find all kinds of opportunities to do that. After I started this teaching, was working on it, I was at Costco, and having an old person's experience is what I'm doing more and more. I was in the hearing aid line at Costco. I don't know how, that's when you're getting up there. But you may know that people our age, the older we get, the more impatient we become. So we're waiting. Costco, this is Christmas time, or around Christmas time at Costco. So it's already kind of tense. And this older couple comes up, and they just wanted to pick something up. So they went around the queue, around the line, and went up to the counter. And the young lady very politely said, I'm sorry, you have to wait in line. And they're like, oh. And by the time they got back to our line, they're muttering, I just want to pick something up. So doing the seeking, hey, there's one right there. So I was in front of them. It was very easy for me just to go, you know what, you guys are just picking something up. Why don't you go? And I promise you, be careful. Once we get focused on this neighbor worship and we ask God to reveal these things to us, you're going to see all kinds of opportunities during your day to do neighbor worship. In fact, I know a lot of you already are involved in that. When we were here just before Christmas, Pastor Juan was talking about all the things you have done and all the things you're going to do, from handing out food in the parking lots, going down to the parking lot downtown and helping people, getting gifts together for families that aren't able to really give their kids gifts. And it just took a little quick look on Facebook to see a lot of unleashed faces already involved in neighbor worship. You didn't know it was worship maybe, but you are worshiping God when you do these good deeds and shine the light to your neighbor. It's just good for us to see it that way and know this is kind of on my checklist. In order for me to be spiritually healthy and really worship to the full intent, how am I doing in neighbor worship? Not just church events, but just every day in my life. Am I out there helping people in a way that shines light and worshiping God in that way? So we have family worship, we have neighbor worship. I told you this is going to be easy. The third one is personal worship. This is the one where maybe it gets a little bit more challenging. The anchor verse I chose for personal worship is something that Paul wrote to the Romans, to the Roman church. He was talking about fear in the previous chapter, like a lot of you are going through some fearful experiences. becoming new Christians in this new way. There's Roman persecution, there's Jewish persecution, and yet God has brought you through that. Even though you have fear, God is in control. You know, that's something that we need to hear. Sidebar, sorry. I have so many conversations recently that have stood out to me with believers who are kind of wringing their hands with the way the culture's moving right now and some of the new ideas in our culture and where we're going. It's almost as if they're so fearful and they forget that God is in control. I know we have real issues in our culture. I know we do. And we should do everything that we can to shine the light in our culture. But never forget, there's so much fear out there. In conversations, I experience people expressing that. Paul says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, He's taking care of us. He's in control. Offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, because this is your true and proper worship. I think a good way to say that for Paul is to say, this is complete worship. I mean, we certainly do worship together in the family when we're here. That's wonderful. We certainly do worship in a way that we're always helping our neighbor whenever we can. But the true and proper and complete worship has to have that third part, that personal worship. And here's what I mean by that. Personal worship has to do with obedience, the pursuit of righteousness. What we do when we're standing on that crossroads and a temptation comes, that's an opportunity for worship. That's where we actually ask ourselves, am I going to worship God right now or not? Because we can't follow through in something ungodly, something that goes against what God would have us do and still say, but I'm in worship right now. It's like we step out of worship when we give into that temptation. In the upper room when Jesus was with his apostles and he was just getting ready to go to the cross, he told them this, I'm going to give you a new command. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. And then I just grabbed chapter 14, 15 and tagged it right on. If you love me, keep my commands. So Jesus said, I'm going to give you a new command, love others. And if you love me, then keep my commands. What does that tell us to do? Love other people. But here's what we see, how obedience is wrapped up in that. He had just finished washing the disciples' feet when he said that. That was very uncomfortable for them. He kind of took off his outer garment and looked like he was dressed like a slave, dropped down on his knees, got that basin of water. They're up there. Their Lord is down here. It's very uncomfortable for them. And yeah, their feet probably needed washing, but that's not why Jesus did it. So I want to show you something. This is the posture of how you are to live. As I have done for you, do for others. Sacrifice yourself for other people. Ooh, I struggle with that. I like my comforts. I like my pleasure. I like things generally, in many cases, to be about me. And when I read this, I'm supposed to sacrifice myself for others. A new command I give you, love one another. And Jesus said, and if you obey me, if you love me, you will obey my commands. If you love me, you will love others. You'll love one another. And we can't separate those things. And so as we go through life, that's the thing to access. That's the thing that we want to look at our clipboard from the doctor and say, well, let me see, how am I doing in this area of being sacrificing to myself? Back in the days of the Old Testament, they knew what sacrificing was. It wasn't a living sacrifice. Somebody brought a sacrifice to the temple, whatever it may be, a lamb, a turtle dove, whatever it may be, an oxen. It was finite. It came to an end. They handed over the animal, and the animal was killed. They never saw it again. This what's a living sacrifice? That sounds like an oxymoron. But Jesus knew exactly what he was saying. He says, your life is a sacrifice. Man, that's a tall order. See, that's why this kind of worship can be so powerful. Because once we get a hold of that, imagine going through your life going, it's not about me. I have a family thing today, and we're all going to be in the living room, and I'm going to be in the spirit in that experience that it's all about everybody else. I go to my workplace, and we're having a meeting there, and we're all going to sit around the table. I walk into that room going, it's not about me, it's for somebody else. If I go and help that person over there, it's going to cost me some money. It's going to cost me some time. It's going to be an effort of energy. I have to sacrifice that in order to help that person. Man, I'll tell you, man, I love people that live that way. My wife lives that way, and I feel so convicted living with her. But she does it, and it's powerful. And I need that conviction. Because that is personal worship. And when we come toe-to-toe with something that usually defeats us, and we all have those in life, big and little things, 9 times out of 10, I'll give in to this temptation. The idea was planted in my mind by the enemy, and I really want to follow through with it right now, and 9 times out of 10, I do. But here today, right now, nope. This is an opportunity for me to worship you and obeying you. Man, that's convicting. That's what I've experienced in digging into this. Personal worship. There's family worship. Love it. It's kind of, I think, the easy one. There's neighbor worship. A little more challenging. I'm kind of not in the mood to be even talking to anybody else today, let alone helping people out. A lot of them I don't even like that much. Neighbor worship, a little more challenging, but personal worship, man, there's nobody else there. It's you and God. And we make those decisions when we personally sacrifice ourselves for what God has called us to do. That's an amazing level of worship that perhaps we didn't realize was even worship, and many of us aren't experiencing all that often. Man, I love where Pastor Juan is going with this. If this has been helpful, this is just the appetizer. He's got 4 more weeks of things we can get a hold of and go, man, if we put these things in place, if we have the clipboard and we can check those things off and go, now I'll put these into practice. By summertime, I'm going to be a lot more spiritually healthy. I hope it's been helpful to you. It may have prompted something in your mind. And here's the thing that I love describing. This all begins with just a legit relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Now that's been said in all different kinds of ways. What it basically means is we come to a place in our life, I call it a definitive point where we go, I've investigated that, I've heard enough, you know what, I believe that, and I want that. I want that peace, I want that security, I want that assurance that I really believe is found in Jesus Christ. And I definitively, at this point, make a decision to accept the gift He wants to give me. That might be something, I don't know if you haven't taken that step, you're saying, well, not today, and I'm not ready yet. I encourage you to investigate. Ask the next question. There's something here. If you feel that, you very well may be prompted by God. It may be the first time you've ever felt God really prompt you. And there's no hook. There's no bait and switch. It's simply you going, okay, well, I want to know more. And if that's you, want to make sure that you have an opportunity to do that here today. You can talk to Pastor Tony or myself afterwards. We're pretty approachable, and no question has floored us ever. You can text New Start on your phone to the number you see up on the screen, and that'll connect you and get you going with a little dialogue, or go out to the Welcome Center. But I encourage you, if you have not come to that definitive point of accepting Christ, and you might say, You might say, I'm not even sure if I had. I mean, my grandma prayed a prayer over me when I was little, and she sprinkled me, and she said I was saved, but I don't know if I'm saved. That could be that. Just ask your questions. We would love to help you take that next step. And above that, I hope we'll take these three things with us and learn how to worship, get that Maserati out of the garage and put the pedal to the metal, and just an experience, a kind of worship and a kind of spiritual health that perhaps we've never experienced before. Thanks for letting me talk to you about this a little bit this morning. Let's go ahead and pray. God, thank you so much for our time here. Thank you that you never leave anything out. Everything that we need, you give us to keep growing and having a more fulfilling, meaningful, the life that you've designed for us, you give it to us. Help us to grab a hold of it, take it to heart, and put it into practice this week to worship you like we've never worshiped you before. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you guys so much. Have a great week.